And this is where the 144,000 show up again. Remember, they showed up first time in chapter 7. You got to kind of pay attention when you're reading through these passages of what you read in chapter 7 and then what you've read in chapter 14, because the conditions have changed in chapter 14, and that's why it reads the way it reads. And we're going to read 5 verses tonight, all 5 of them right now, and then I'm just going to go down and hit the things that are in the passage as best I can. I kind of got them enumerated here, and then we'll call it a night, because chapter 14 gets into some deeper stuff as we go on down through here. But anyway, in verse 1, it says, "And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the 4 beasts and elders. And no man can learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God." All right. So what these are the Jews that are mentioned in Revelation chapter 7, where there are 12,000 from each tribe that are sealed. Revelation 7:4, just turn back there. We'll just read one verse. We don't have to read through the whole passage there. But in Revelation 7:4, he said, "I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." And in chapter 7, you have each tribe mentioned, and that there was, how many sealed? Let's see, what is it? 12,000. Yeah, 12,000 from each tribe sealed. 12,000 from Judah, and he goes on to then he gives you the 12 tribes. Now, you'll notice that he's given you the tribes of the children of Israel, not a bunch of JWs. This is not a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses, which claim to be the original Jehovah's Witnesses, that claim to be the 144,000. Well, they're not. These are Jews, 12,000 from each tribe. And remember, we were warned about folks that would claim that. You know, when we talk about, I'm teaching on replacement theology on Sunday, just about every cult, in fact, I can't think of one that doesn't try to replace Israel in some way. Your Jehovah's Witnesses try to replace themselves with this 144,000, or replace the 144,000 with themselves. The Mormons try to duplicate the Levitical priesthood and take that to themselves. Every cult is going to be stealing something from that Jew. And Revelation 2:9, remember we have two times we're warned. It says, "I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan." So every time you go by a Jehovah's Witness building, you're looking at a synagogue of Satan. Why? They say they're Jews and they're not. They think they're the 144 and whatever. Revelation 3:9 says, "Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I've loved thee." Now, this may be specifically in the tribulation for those that are trying to steal that, but your JWs are still going to be here, right? They're not saved. Huh? Yep. So whether it's tribulation or church age, man, they're here, because they ain't going nowhere, that's for sure. But any form of replacement theology is going to be guilty of these verses because they're liars. They're saying there's something they're not. You've got the British Israelism, same thing, man. I mean, they're over there thinking that they're Ephraim, and I can't remember which. Either England thinks they're Ephraim and United States is Manasseh, or vice versa. I can't remember. I think it's that way. They think they're Ephraim. They're no Ephraim. And we're not Manassas. We're a bunch of miserable Gentiles. Huh? Yeah, it's true. All right. Now, there's a big difference between chapter 7 and chapter 14. In chapter 7, these 144 are on earth, and they're being sealed. That's what we read in chapter 7. He's sealing 12,000 from each tribe. And in chapter 14, they're in heaven. They've already been sealed. They're all there, but they've already been sealed, and they've been redeemed from the earth, verse 3. It says, which were redeemed from the earth. They're no longer on earth. So what you have is, in chapter 7, you have the mid-trib. You've got the middle of the tribulation, or the middle of the week, where he seals them. By the time you get to chapter 14, you're at the end, and they're already in glory. It's just the very end. This would be the post-tribulation rapture. And these 104, because they're all there, you could say, well, some of them are martyred. No, they're all present in heaven, all 144,000. So this is, they've made it home. And he describes them there in chapter 14 as all male, all virgins. That means none of them have been with a woman. They speak with no guile, and they are without fault before God. And I'm thinking to myself, how can that be? And when I first read that, I thought, how could that be? These are men, flesh and blood men. Are all 144,000 of them, were they not married? But you've got to remember where you're at. You're in heaven. And these were redeemed from among men. All right, let's think about us. Okay? Got a married man, married man, married man, married man, married man, married man, married man. Okay? Rapture happens. Got women, moms, and rapture happens. New body. Is it a virgin male? They're all virgin males, aren't they? Listen, when we get our resurrection body, it's a virgin male body. Ladies, when you get your new body, it's a virgin male body. There ain't nothing but virgins in heaven. All the angels are virgins, and these 144,000, when they get their new bodies, they're virgins. And you know what else? They're without fault. All their sins are gone. He said he would take away Israel's sins. He said that in Romans chapter 11, that he would forgive all their sins. He'd wipe away all their sins, and they're gone. Ours are gone too. We stand before the throne of God without fault. I'm talking about sin, not service. And there shouldn't be any guile in anybody's mouth at that point too. Now, he does say something there about him being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. Now, that's kind of hard for me to process, because I'll show you something, and I don't quite understand all this, because first fruits, the Bible talks about the order in 1 Corinthians 15, Christ the first fruits, then they that are Christ that is coming, then cometh the end. And I've heard two different versions of this thing, and I haven't got it worked out. I'll be very honest with you. I've heard what the standard version, what Dr. Ruckman teaches, and then Steve Combs taught something else about that order, and it actually makes sense, but none of it kind of jives with this passage here, unless he's talking about the first fruits of the tribulation, because they would be. Anyone that goes up in that post-trib rapture are the first fruits of that thing. And that may be what he's referring to. The reason that order over there in 1 Corinthians 15, if you want to turn there, let's look at that. I'll give you the other interpretation of that thing. It says, 1 Corinthians 15:22, for as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. All right? But every man in his own order. And he says, Christ the first fruits. afterward they that are Christ at his coming, then cometh the end, when he shall deliver up the kingdom to God. All right. Well, when it says there, Christ the first fruits, I don't know if you know this or not, but Pentecost is first fruits. It's the celebration of first fruits. Well, what happens at Pentecost? Well, that's connected with the church. You have Christ, that was Passover, first fruits. That's usually the church. Somebody did come up with Christ when he was resurrected. So there were some saints that got their bodies according to Matthew chapter 27. We know that that's not Israel. Because it says about David in Acts chapter 2 that David is still both dead and buried. So if Israel had come up and got their new bodies, David would have got his new body. And Acts 2 says he did not. So who came up? Well, it could have been those Gentiles that were before Abraham. I don't know. I don't know exactly who they are. I suspect that's who they are. But Israel didn't come up. But it says Christ, Passover, first fruits, that's Pentecost. So one of the ways you can read this is he's talking about Christ's resurrection, and then see, Passover and Pentecost are so close together. They're only separated by 50 days. You're still, you could call both of those first fruits. In fact, they do classify them both as first fruits. So you've got the church coming up. Then it says, afterward, they that are Christ at his coming. That's Israel, second advent. Or post-tribulation rapture. They that are Christ at his coming. Then cometh the end of the millennium. You say, well, that's the dead. That's not those in Christ. No, you got servants that are showing up. Listen, those who begin the millennium do not live to the end of it. Why? Because death hasn't been conquered yet, and nobody's going to live that whole day, that 1,000-year day, or that 1,000-year day. That one day is 1,000 years. So what happens is they have to be resurrected at the great white throne, and then God's servants are rewarded at that. If he's talking about the entire picture of the resurrection, that would encompass it. Some say he's just talking about the first resurrection, where there are 3 parts. And you can kind of make it say that, but it's kind of pushing it. So I've been kind of divided on it. I'll hear Dr. Ruckman teach on it, and I'll say, yeah, that sounds right. And then I remember what Brother Steve Combs taught on it, and I said, man, that sounds right. So I don't really know. But the first fruits here could just be the first fruits of the tribulation itself. They're the first ones up. That sounds about as good as interpretation as any. All right. So these are the remnant of the Jews, saved and sealed out of great tribulation. Now, there's one thing you need to think about this, okay? It's composed of Jews that are residing in Israel. They're residing in Israel. Look at Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4. Ezekiel 9, verse 4. It says, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark. These are those that are sealed. And set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Any Jews that haven't made it home, that are not residing in Israel, that are not, you got to remember when there's crisis abroad, they always they go to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a fortress all on its own. It's not easy for an army to kind of, attack Jerusalem from a ground force type of deal. Now, we're not talking about planes and all, missiles and all that, but a ground force. Very hard to attack them. They got the high ground. So they would come there. Well, they're going through, and they're coming up, they're sealing these 144,000 that are there. They're there in Jerusalem. And the reason I say that is there's about 14 million Jews worldwide. About 14 million. With barely half of them in Israel. But they're scattered throughout Israel. Now remember, 144,000 is not that many compared to 14 million. That's not even what, a couple percent, 3%, 4% maybe? That's not very many. And that's how many he seals. So you only have a small remnant that escape. You realize that, okay, Hitler was able with the final solution to exterminate about 6 million Jews. We are talking more than double that on a worldwide scale, because nearly all of these 14 million will perish, except for a very few thousand. Now there may be some, well, let's put it this way. I'll go as far as to say it could be at least half, and I'll show you the verses when we get to it here of why I think that. But look at Matthew 24. Matthew 24. I mean, if there's going to be some Jews that are plugged in, and when they see this, they know exactly what to do. Matthew 24:15, it says, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place." Well, they're going to know exactly what that means. They know that there's that image standing in that temple, because it says in Luke, standing where it ought not. It says, "Whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house." In other words, man, if you don't hot foot from that moment, you are not going to make it out alive. "Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days." And they're not going to make it. "But pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day." Of course, if you're flying out of an airport, that's the worst thing to happen if it lands on the Sabbath. Planes don't fly out on the Sabbath. And in the winter, planes can't necessarily take off. I do believe my calculation was right. It's the beginning of April. You can still have some winter in April. I was calculating 1,040 days mid-trib, and I think if we're raptured in June, it works out April. Yep. It can happen. And sometimes, spring will hit in March. And that was in, yep. Yep. So it's very possible. Yeah. Well, you're not fully into spring till what, the 20th of April? Isn't that when spring hits? So at the first part of April, you're still considered winter. Yep. So he said, pray not, your flight be in the winter or neither on the Sabbath day. But only a small remnant of these escaped the Antichrist. A very small remnant of them. It's we seem to think, God's going to rescue all the Jews. A lot of them will perish. Matter of fact, God allows the thing to go on because he says that what he said over there in Revelation 6, that we have to wait until your brethren have been, let me see if I can find that verse. "How long, Lord, wilt thou suffer us to," I'll get it here in a minute. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yeah, it said, "And they cried with a loud voice," verse 10, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season until their fellow servants also and their brethren, that they should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. Wow. That was in Revelation 6, verse 10 and 11. So, when we talk about the tribulation and the Jews accepting Israel, we're talking about a very small remnant. Now, I think there'll be more than half of those Jews that are back in Israel, but there's still going to be a lot of Jews worldwide. And I think many of them may get saved due to the efforts of these 144,000, even though they're abroad, as well as a lot of Gentiles. But many of them, if not most of them, will be martyred. You got to remember, this remnant here, this 144,000 we're talking about, believe on Jesus Christ, because it says they follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. So they're believers. Now, in chapter 7, if you remember when we covered chapter 7, right after these are sealed, in chapter 7, a multitude is mentioned. And that's why we suspect, it actually doesn't say it, but it's implied that these 144,000 go out and witness to the Gentile nations. You know that Jesus Christ was going to, the plan was Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. Well, that's going to be fulfilled even in the tribulation. Hopefully, we have fulfilled that in the church age, that we've gone to the uttermost parts of the earth. But these 144,000, I think there's going to be some miraculous miracles going on as far as being able. I'm thinking, how the 144,000 going to get out of Selah Petra and tell anybody anything? Well, the same way that Philip got into the desert and found himself, all over the place. The Lord just, it's going to be like Star Trek, with a transporter. Transport them here, transport them there. Give them signs and wonders, Because there's going to be some Gentiles that said, they're going to be saying exactly what that Ethiopian eunuch said, how can I except some man guide me? And they're going to need someone to guide them. And those 144,000, man, they are going to be locked in. They are going to have the keeping the law of Moses and the faith of Jesus Christ. All right, let's see. In Revelation 7, 8, and 9 is where you find those that let me read that to you. In in chapter 7, verse 8, it says, of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000, of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000, of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Then it says in verse 9, after this, I beheld, lo, a great multitude, which no man can number, of all nations, kindreds, and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. And it says, one of the elders, verse 13, answered, saying to him, what are these, which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, these are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. You can see the element of works there. They had to wash their robes, made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And notice that they're before the throne too, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Revelation chapter 7. So you have the 144,000 that are sealed. They're sent out. They win a multitude. That was always God's plan. The plan was not just Israel and just curse the Gentiles. Jesus Christ was to be a light to the Gentiles. That's the reason why the Jews were so upset. Jesus Christ kept bringing up the Gentiles. He said, don't you remember that widow? And then they wanted to throw him off a cliff for it, because he talked about those Gentiles that believed the prophets more than the Israelites did. It's always been the case. I mean, man, we talked about what's his name? The leper. Naaman. Naaman the leper. There's a Gentile, but he brings him up. And then he brings up the widow of Zarephath. And every time he did that, he just inflamed them because those Gentiles believed stronger than the Jews did. Listen, you've got three, or what we believe there are three wise men that show up that are looking for the Messiah, the King of Israel, and the Jews don't even know it's happened. They have no idea. Isn't that crazy? And the book was written to them. And yet these three are looking for him. We think there are three of them. Something else to note here, notice that there are two Mount Zions mentioned. There are two Mount Zions. This is the one that's up in heaven. Because it says, I looked and a lamb stood on the Mount Zion with them 144,000. And I believe it goes on to say, and it says that we're a new song before the throne. Now, let me give you one verse on that. There's more than, you can find several verses on it. But Hebrews 12:22 is the clearest one on the heavenly one. It says, but ye are coming to the Mount Zion. Now, it's either spelled with a Z or an S, but it can be spelled both ways. But ye are coming to the Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels. Well, that's in heaven. That's where that is. But then you have a Mount Zion that's here on this earth. And I'll give you two verses on that. 2 Samuel 5:7 tells you, 2 Samuel 5:7, nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, with a Z. And it says, the same is the city of David. So if you were to go over to Israel and you were to say, show me the city of David, and they're showing you the city of David, that is Zion. And I believe it's just below where the Temple Mount is. I think the Temple Mount looks over onto the city of David. I think they call it the Old City, if I'm not mistaken. It is the Old City, yeah. Then Matthew 21:5 says, tell ye the daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek and sitting upon an ass, a colt, the foal of an ass. Well, the daughter of Zion is the children of Israel that live in Zion. And he's saying, your king cometh to you. Well, that didn't happen in heaven. That happened on earth. And then one more verse is Romans 9:33. Paul writes, as it is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and rock of offense. Whosoever believeth on him should not be ashamed, or shall not be ashamed. So, the reason why this is important that you understand there are two Zions is because Lucifer has tried, as Satan has already tried to scale one of those Zions. When he said, I will ascend. And when he says, I will ascend over there in Isaiah 14, he's talking about ascending Zion. Well, he didn't make it. And he couldn't do it. But guess what? There's a Zion down here. And it's on a mountain too. And he's going to try to scale that because what did he want to scale the first Zion for? Because somebody was sitting on a throne. He said, I will be like the Most High. Well, guess what we got right down here on the earthly Zion, but a seat called the mercy seat. And it's God's seat. And just as he wanted to sit on that one and he got denied, and he got booted out, he's going to be able to achieve that here on this earth for a very short period of time to sit in that seat. That's what this is about, folks. Him fulfilling his prophecy, I will ascend, I will exalt myself. He talks about ascending the sides of the north. Well, anytime you go up to Jerusalem, you travel up because it's on a mountain. And he wants to ascend, sit in that seat, and claim to be God. That's what 2 Thessalonians 2 talks about. Ezekiel 28 talks about it. I mean, he wants to fulfill that. So everything that happened, Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, darkness upon the face of the deep. Everything that happened there where he failed is now surfacing again, but this time it's on the earth. And it's, even though it's a, The Zion down here is probably a poor picture of the one that's in heaven, but still, God chose to put his name there, didn't he? I will be like the Most High. He is bent on fulfilling his 5 I wills. And guess what he's going to have down here with him? Angels. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. He's going to have a congregation of not only men, but he's going to have a congregation of angels. All right. There are 3 songs that are mentioned. There's the Song of Moses. Anybody know what the Song of Moses is? Huh? Yeah, what? You might know the chapter? Huh? Song of Moses? Deuteronomy 32. That's the Song of Moses. It's pretty long, too. Now, that's one they'll sing. Now, where's the Song of the Lamb? I don't know either. We don't know what it is yet, but we know there's the Song of Moses, there's the Song of the Lamb, which is yet to be revealed. And then he mentions that there's going to be a song that only these 144,000 know. That no, he says, what was it in verse 3? And they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the 4 beasts and the elders, and no man can learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. So I don't think, if it was the Song of Moses, I got it written down. I already know it. It's right there. It's in Deuteronomy 32. That is the Song of Moses. So it's got to be a song that, and it says no man can learn that song but the 144,000. That's different. But the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb, the converts that are down here sing that song. Why? Works and faith. They have to have testimony of Jesus Christ. That's the faith. And they have to have keep the works or keep the law of Moses. There's the works. So they sing both songs because it's faith and works. I know the Baptists hate that, but it's just the truth. Now, we're not going to be singing no Song of Moses. We might be singing the Song of the Lamb, but not the Song of Moses, because ours is not of our works. You have to have some works. You say, what do you have to have? Well, you can't take the mark. That's a work. There's probably some other things. I don't know. The Gentiles probably don't have too much on them, but they can't take the mark. Listen, they can, if they were passing out the mark right now, they could stamp that thing all over my body. I could look like a 666 poster. It wouldn't make no difference. People, they get a credit card. I've got a credit card that says 6661. Okay? It wouldn't matter if it said 666, 666, 666. I'd keep it. In fact, I think I'd probably use that card more than any other card I'd use, because I'd leave the Antichrist to debt. No, I'm just. You say, why? Because none of that applies to me. None of that has anything to do with me. I don't care if I get a license, but I'd hate to have one that says 666 and be the pastor of this church. We know where the devil's church is. Because that's what they'd say, So I wouldn't want it for that reason, but I would care less. I could care less. It's got nothing to do with me. Huh? It'd probably just draw people. I want to see him. Eyeball to eyeball. Maybe I ought to do that. I can request one in a vanity plate. Revelation 15:3, I believe we've got them singing there, these 2 songs. It says they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty, just and true are thy ways, thou King of saints. All right, and maybe that's in reference to the song of the Lamb, I don't know. That might be some of the words right there. But you got those 2, but then you got one that only the 144,000. I have no idea. No idea what that's going to be. All right, here's something that's important, and most of you know this, but never confuse these virgins, because I'm telling you they're out there by the droves. Never confuse these virgins, plural, with the chaste virgin, singular. Because this is not the church. The church is a virgin, not many virgins. 2 Corinthians 11:2 says, "For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you a chaste virgin to Christ." Not many, just one. So when you're reading over there in Matthew 25 or 24 where it talks about 10 virgins, that ain't the church. She's not 10 virgins, she's one virgin. It's talking about somebody else. And by the way, you say, well, but the bridegroom's coming to get. Yeah, those 10 virgins go, or those 5 virgins go out to meet the bridegroom. Didn't say they married him. They go out to meet him, and there's a reason. Well, we're going to get to it. It says, then shall the kingdom, Matthew 25, 1 and 2, then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. Now notice there's 10 of them. That's the number of Gentiles. These may be the multitude of converts that the Bible talks about. And 5 of them are foolish, and 5 of them are wise. 5 of them are ready, because this happens. This is a post-trib rapture. We know all of the 144,000 make it because they're accounted for. Only half of these virgins make it, so it can't be them, right? Doesn't matter whether you're one of the 144,000 or you're some Gentile. When they all get to heaven, they're all virgin men, right? And when you are, verse 4, okay, he talks about being redeemed from the earth. And when you're redeemed from the earth, you get a new body. Romans 8:23 says this, because this applies to everybody. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, that means to know, the redemption of our body. And it says these were redeemed from the earth, redeemed from among men. What happens when we get redeemed? Redemption of our body. We get a new body. What is that body? It's a 33-year-old male body that is now a virgin body. No guile, without fault before the throne of God. Same thing for these. What is our resurrection body like? Likened to the angels, right? Okay. Notice that these are virgins without number, but the church is one chaste virgin. Look at Song of Solomon chapter 6. I don't know how people get this stuff confused. You know, you got the trump of God mentioned over there in 2 Thessalonians or 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and then there's talking about it being the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. When he's talking about the voice of God, not 7 trumpets. And his folks just twisting things around. And they got these virgins. Oh, yeah, this is the church. This is not the church. Song of Solomon 6, verse 8 and 9 tells you the difference. It says, there are 80 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. My dove, my undefiled, is but one. She is the only one of her mother. Bible says that New Jerusalem's the mother of us all. She is the choice one of her that bare her. The daughters, here's those virgins, the daughters saw her and blessed her. The queens and the concubines, and they praised her. You know eventually what's going to happen? Right now, Israel, the Jews themselves are an enemy of the gospel. At that wedding, when that remnant arrives there, when those converts arrive there, they're going to praise the bride. They're going to praise her. They're going to receive her. It's going to be like, you know how, and we follow this when we have weddings. You got the groom and the groomsmen, right? But what do you have on the other side, on the bride side? You have her maidens, right? You know, maidens, virgins. Her maidens stand That's what you're going to have at this. You're going to have all these virgins up there without number witnessing the wedding. And they are going to praise the bride. Right now, we're criticized by them. Look at Psalm 45, verse 13 to 15. What do those virgins go out to do? They go out to meet the groom, right? They're going out to meet him, the bridegroom. Why are they going out to meet the bridegroom? They're going to a wedding. They're going to be the witnesses. I don't know how folks somehow get to church over there in Matthew 25. But they do. We're up there waiting on them. We've got all the wrinkles and spots worked out, In Psalm 45, verse 13 to 15, and it says, "And the king's daughter," that'd be us, "is all glorious within. Her clothing is wrought gold. She shall be brought unto the king in raiment of needlework. The virgins, her companions, shall follow her, shall be brought unto thee." You see that? Isn't that what happens at a wedding? The maidens are right there behind the bride. It's interesting, a lot of times you have about 5. I think 5 is about the limit you have, or probably more, but I don't know. It's interesting that sometimes it's 5. Because there's going to be some foolish, while this is going on, there's some foolish virgins that didn't make the wedding. And man, it gets rough down here on planet Earth. He that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. It says, "With gladness and rejoicing shall they be brought. They shall enter into the king's palace." So we're talking about these showing up for the wedding of the bride and the bridegroom, the church in Jesus Christ. Also, one thing is, notice that there are musical instruments in heaven, much to the chagrin of the Church of Christ. But no worries, they won't be there either. Or at least most of them won't. I think there are a few Church of Christ that might be saved. A lot of those are disgruntled Baptists. Got saved and kind of filtered into the Church of Christ, Did you see the guy with the pitch pipe? I don't know why they think that you can't have musical instruments. God had musical instruments in the Old Testament. There's musical instruments in heaven. Where did they come? Who told them that? Why do they think you can't have and listen, a pitch pipe is a musical instrument. Aren't you? Beep, I go there and I'm like, I'm terrible, ain't I? Whatever they do. Anyway, Revelation 15:2, you got more harps mentioned there. A lot of harps, man. I think that's where they get the thing. We're sitting on a cloud playing a harp. But there's musical instruments in heaven. There's even animals in heaven because you've got horses up there. Now, I think they're supernatural horses, but you got some. There's no telling what we're going to see up there. You got cherubim that represent, you got the birds and mammals and wild beasts. And, there's going to be all kinds of stuff up there. Anyway, I did want to give you a thought. The Bible does say that if you took the mark of the beast, that's it. If you took the mark, you were through. Damned forever. But I want to throw something at you and see what you think about it. What if you took the mark and then you realized, uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that. And you had it right here on your wrist. Just always thought about this passage of Scripture. I'm thinking, now, I'm not saying this is absolute, because I'll give you a part of it. It kind of doesn't match, but it says, "If thy right eye offend thee," where you get that one right here. And Dr. Ruckman talks about that cyclops, or that third eye. And you get that thing right there. It said, "Thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell." Now, it's a little bit of a stretch, but to get rid of the mark, you'd have to have your head cut off. Either that or a good melon scooper to get rid of that between your eyes. But But he says, if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off. My question is this, okay? If you had the mark and you're standing, okay, the judgment of the nations is taking place. God's separating the goats from the sheep. He's separating individuals, not nations. Goats from the sheep. And they call you forward and says, that guy got the mark? Lord, he don't even have a hand. My question is, if you have the mark on your hand and you get your hand cut off, do you have the mark anymore? I'm just asking. And if you had it on your head and you got your head cut off, would the Lord consider that, well, you know? I'm just asking. I don't know. Huh? You chose it. But say you repented of it. And you cut off your own hand. But if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Now that could be millennial too, for somebody looking at the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But then he mentions the foot over in Mark. Now I'm like, oh man, who gets the mark on their foot? That was great. Good timing. Just something for you to think about. The other thing that, and I don't know if Dr. Ruckman ever recorded. I heard this from Dr. Ruckman. I know I did. I just don't remember where. Don't remember if it was in the book of Revelation or was it a tape that I heard. But one thing about leprosy turns the forehead white. And he kind of said there's a possibility that there's something, I don't know. But yet anyone that takes the mark gets leprosy. So I don't know. Is there any chance for somebody? It doesn't look that way, but if you had that thing on your wrist and you cut off your hand, I mean, you ain't got the mark anymore. So I don't know. I kind of hope. You kind of think that somebody comes to the realization, oh man, did I really mess up? Even those Jews realized, I mean, they don't realize till that image shows up that they messed up. But some of those Gentiles, I think there comes a point, though, where they know exactly who this guy is. I don't think it's a mystery, folks, at all. It says that these armies appeared to fight against the Lamb and against his army. They know what's going on. It's kind of wild, but, look at this crowd we got out here, man. Look how they are. They're wicked. Okay. We'll stop there tonight. We'll pick it up verse 6 next week. We got a long way to go to get through this chapter. Anybody got a question or comment?